Hello, welcome back to Word on the Street with Gary Clinton. I apologize for my voice. I've been a little under the weather the last couple of days, but I felt like I needed to kind of express my opinion on something here. And I come to you today with a little bit of a heavy heart um, for the citizens of New York City. Uh, I feel like this heavy heart is not necessarily for the choice that they made in electing uh, the socialist or communist Mamdani to the mayoralship of New York City. That, of course, is their democratic right, a right as citizens of that city to vote in place the person they feel will better represent them or better serve them, and that is what it seems those who have turned out to vote as a majority did choose, and that's their right. My heart is heavy for these people because I believe they've been misled. I believe that they've listened to the policy platform put forth by Mamdani, explaining that he was going to make things more affordable. He was going to make housing more affordable, freeze the rents, free buses, all these different things that are going to make things so much better for people who are already living in a very, very high cost of living city. Now, unfortunately, what I think many of the voters don't understand is that he does not have the power to enact many of these things that he was promising them in his campaign. These are simply things that are beyond his control, be it through other committees throughout the city or they're issues that are controlled by the governor of the state. Of course, he has said that he will find a way to do it, and he's going to make it happen. Um, and he will some of these things. He will make them happen, even things that are somewhat beyond his legal control as a mayor. I believe that he will cut certain services throughout the city that are necessary. Some of them may be bloated, and you find that in government at any level. There are some things that are bloated, some things that need to be cut and streamlined. But I think he will go a little further than simply streamlining things and cut certain services for people. Now, if you looked at the title of this video, you may be wondering what this has to do with the title that I have given it. And I think, though he may not have the legal right to institute Sharia in New York City, I think we all have to know and understand that when there is law enforcement is pulled out of an area, that there is a vacuum, and that vacuum will be filled by those communities. And I honestly believe that Mamdani is not only Muslim, which is why I want you to understand. I'm sure many people will claim that I am Islamophobic and that I'm attacking a religion. And I want you to understand that I'm not. I believe the Muslims have every right to believe what they believe and practice their peaceful religion. However, I believe the ideas that have been put forward in the past by Mamdani are very indicative of his Islamic terrorist idea. Um, a lot of the Islamist idea, the radical Islamist ideas, have to do with controlling everyone around you and pushing your own theocracy to be in full control of your entire surroundings. And of course, he has said that he thinks of things a little differently now, and that he believes a little more mainstream along along with some of the moderate Democrats. Now, I can't give you exact chapter and verse, but it has been noted in the Islamic faith that it's okay to lie to the infidel in order to accomplish your end goals, which means that a lot of the extreme Islamists do believe it's okay to lie, to outright lie to everyone around you to convince them that you have the right ideas and that you believe the way they do in order to gain their trust, in order to gain a position of power. And once you have done that, then you can move on to moving towards your own ideology. And I truly believe from things I have seen that that is exactly what Mamdani is doing. I believe that he has become a little tamer in his speech in order to drive people to believe that he has the people's interest at heart. And he simply does not. And of course, this is my opinion. I have not met the man, don't care to meet the man. And from what I have seen him say, though, and from what I have seen in the past, I truly believe that this is his mission. He will gain the trust and gain the power in order to fool the infidel into believing that he has their interest at heart. And now that he has won the mayoralship, I don't see it happening right away, but I see a gradual move towards that ideology. Now, I said before that he does not have the legal authority to institute Sharia law in the city of New York City. However, he will have control over law enforcement throughout the city as far as the NYPD is concerned. He will have the authority to hire the person at the head of the New York City Police. And of course, it is his obligation to fill that seat with somebody that he believes will fall in line with him. And I believe he will do that. I think what we have in New York City PD right now is moving in the right direction. It looks like our chief of police there now our commissioner has the right things in mind and is moving in that right direction. However, I see that being changed. Now, why is this important? Because as he is in control of the NYPD, that gives him the ability to direct the operation of the NYPD. That means he can go in to select communities and pull law enforcement out of those communities. Once he has pulled law enforcement out of those communities, it creates a vacuum. And what happens when you have a vacuum? Those who believe themselves to be more powerful will move in to those areas and will take over the city in their areas, and they will enforce Sharia. I hope to be wrong on this, but I truly believe that this is what we're looking at. This will happen. And I just hope that we can find a way to help our citizens in New York City overcome this. I mean, we're already looking at the reality that there will be a mass exodus of strong businesses who aren't looking forward to being taxed even more. I mean, New York City already has one of the highest combined tax rates on businesses. And if that's increased, then we're going to see a mass exodus out of New York City. And I think a lot of the people who are counting on the free things coming to them are going to realize that they don't have the income base to support the kind of tax policy that would be needed in order to support these policies. In other words, the tax base. Your lower income individuals, what taxes they do pay in, when you take into consideration the deductibles, the earned income credits, and different things when they file, they're actually receiving more back than they paid into the tax system. So that being the tax base is going to be extremely diminished. And with the corporations and the higher income earners who are fleeing the state, fleeing the city, those who are actually paying that tax base, the majority of that tax base, will no longer be there, which means there will be a severe deficit in the tax base. And those who were expecting all the freebies, they're going to find out that there is not a tax base in order to support these things that he is encouraging. You're going to see city services such as sanitation and inspections on properties and different things take a drastic dive. And if you think now that some of the properties are not well maintained, and you refer a lot of your landlords as being slumlords, you're going to see that on hyperdrive. It's going to be terrible. So now to the issue of where he claims to be a democratic socialist. So let's look at socialism as a whole. And I think when the way socialism is sold to a lot of people, it is sold as a policy of equality and equity. I think what most people don't realize is that it's simply a facade. Now, theoretically, having everybody have equity in everything sounds great. It sounds like a great moral thing to do. Like you want your neighbor here and your neighbor there. You want everybody to have the same things, the same opportunities, and the opportunity and the things are not exactly the same. Equity and opportunity is a good thing. It's something we all should have. That does not mean putting your thumb on the scales for one religion, one race over the other. It has to do across the board with everybody being able to have the same opportunities, and that's a good thing. Now, when you look at the idea of equity in things, everybody having the same things, it is not a good deal. It is not moral. Of course, on the outset, it looks like it would be. But what you have is those who choose not to be industrious and want all the free things will simply do that. They'll step back and do nothing because they're guaranteed, basic incomes. They're guaranteed services that are going to be provided by the government in their mind, which being provided by the government, as I've discussed before, simply means that it's being provided by the taxpayer. And you, the very people who voted to put Mondami in office, are the taxpayers in that city. So just naturally speaking, when that tax base takes a significant hit, they simply aren't going to have the money to provide some of these services, basic services. I mentioned sanitation. There are so many examples throughout the world and even throughout our own country where cities' tax bases were depleted and these essential services were cut to a bare minimum. You see the kind of trash and garbage that line the streets. You see the kind of open-air drug use all around. These are realities. I know that in New York City, you have seen some of that as well, but not nearly to the degree that you will see it. There are so many videos that a lot of people will claim are deep fakes, but they are actual videos of different streets throughout different cities in our own country that are open air drug markets. People doing drugs out in the open. People comatose as a result of that. Trash all around them. And you have the city governments in many of these cases even providing syringes and needles in the interest of keeping people from using dirty needles is their claim. But in doing so, they are empowering others to use drugs. They're empowering and encouraging these areas, these neighborhoods, where it becomes rampant. And I honestly believe that in the city of New York, that's the kind of things you're going to see happen if something isn't done to control this disaster that's about to take place. Now, I mentioned again about Sharia taking over in the communities where law enforcement has been pulled. And it will happen. Even though Mamdani has changed his tune lately, saying that he believes in empowering the police and in modifying the way the police operate in the city, bringing counselors to respond to various things, such as domestic violence, and thinking that a counselor is going to make a difference. In some instances, a counselor will help, but in domestic disputes, you never know what you're getting into. You can even take the reports over the phones through 911, and it may sound a little less than what it actually is. You need your first responders in those situations to be police officers who have been trained to deal with the violence that occurs in the vast majority of these instances. People like Mondami will have you believe that domestics are just simply people who are having a bad time and they need somebody to counsel them and help them to get through these things. And while that very well is part of the issue, when somebody is violent, when they are intoxicated or they're drug enraged, and this turns into a domestic abuse type call, that first responder needs to be a police officer who is prepared to deal with something like that if it immediately becomes extremely violent, which it does in many ways. Because a lot of these individuals involved in these domestic disputes, the aggressor in a lot of instances believe that they're the boss. Somebody's going to listen to them, and nobody's going to be telling them what to do. So if you have a counselor who's unprepared to deal with a kind of violent response, it can become very dangerous for them. Hopefully it doesn't always turn out like that, and it doesn't. Sometimes these domestic disputes, even when police officers show up, it doesn't necessarily, advance the temperature. A lot of the officers are serving because they do want to make a difference. I spent a short time as a police officer, and in the small town that I worked in, we had a large number of domestic situations that I was called out to. And even in that small town, I discovered that some of them were simply situations where you can talk to people, separate them, turn down the temperature, and things worked out. But there were those as well where simply showing up caused somebody to be more aggressive. And they felt like somebody was, taking away their authority and telling them what to do. And they would put up a fight. and they would turn their anger towards whoever was responding to those situations. And I believe very much that in a situation where you had counselors showing up to a domestic call instead of an officer, that the aggression will be turned on them. And for a large part, most people who are counselors who have learned to speak with people, have learned to kind of turn the temperature down and be able to help people. They are not necessarily prepared to address a situation where the aggression is turned towards them. So from the law enforcement standpoint there, I believe it makes the streets of New York much more dangerous if that law enforcement is pulled back and they simply start moving counselors into positions to address these calls. I believe having worked in a small town in law enforcement and seeing the kind of issues there are and the danger that there is can be very serious. I can only imagine in the big city of New York how much more dangerous and aggressive those situations can be. And I applaud the officers who are there for the right reason. And I feel for them as well, because if Mom Donnie has his way in pulling back the law enforcement, in not totally defunding, but pulling back funding in order to feed other ideas he has, that it's going to put these officers more at danger. I applaud the courage of the officers who stick around and continue to help the citizens of New York City. It is an honorable thing, and I hope they can get through this and come out better on the other side. Now, as far as the Sharia, which I addressed in the title of this video, again, I mentioned that he would not have the legal authority to implement Sharia law in New York City. But by pulling law enforcement out of those areas and simply allowing the communities themselves to fill that vacuum, then that will be filled with Sharia. We see it in neighborhoods in other cities throughout the country. Unfortunately, when that happens, and there is such a consensus in those neighborhoods that say that they want their own leadership and they want to enforce their own laws, they grow so much popularity in that community that if you try to take it back, or you try to move in and do away with some of the unfair practices that have taken over, then you end up with a very, very aggressive situation. A situation where the city leaders end up justifying it by saying, if we try to move in there and do anything about it, then we're outnumbered and we create a huge problem. We create cries of racism and cries of discrimination of one way or the other, which causes them to sit back and do nothing. And we cannot allow that to happen. It is a simple fact of the matter that law and order is necessary. We are a nation of laws, and if those laws that are in step with our national laws and with our Constitution are pulled back and just put aside, then we're not doing our neighbors any favors, and we end up with these pockets that are lawless by some people's definitions. And by definition, it's actually an anarchy. But you'll find in every instance that anarchy becomes a law similar to Sharia. It fills with those who believe that they have a power over others will simply impose their ideas, and there'll be no one there to stop them do that. We see that in prisons. We see that even in short-term jails, where you have certain individuals who are very alpha and believe that they should control everything, and they end up controlling and taking advantage of those other people in those jails and in those prisons. There is a whole nother realm of government, so to speak, inside those institutions. And you can say lawless to the degree that the government is not as powerful in providing the law in the area, because those who within that institution who believe they should be in power have taken over. And in many instances, they even have the backing of some of the guards and employees of those institutions, because these people have ways of threatening their families. And this is a dangerous thing, even within the closed walls. And if we allow that to take hold in open air society, then it will continue to grow. And I guess some cases we want to say, well, that doesn't affect me. My community's doing very well. We have great support for our law enforcement, and things are the way they need to be. So it's not going to affect us. But in reality, it will. It's the kind of thing that, it's like a wound that begins to fester. And, it's a tiny splinter in your finger, and it's no big deal. That'll heal on its own. It's not really affecting the rest of my body. I don't have time to mess with that right now. You'll find that it continues to fester. It continues, that infection spreads and becomes a real issue. And we'll see that. I mean, we've already seen that in some cities, where their ideas of less government have turned into anarchy. Now, I'm not a proponent of heavy government, not at all. I believe our governments, both federally and statewide, in many instances, have grown, way, way larger than they need to be. They've definitely overreached into things, in our lives. And at the same time, in order to protect our Constitution, in order to make sure that our Constitution is enforced with fairness and equity, then we do need some form of government in order we are a representative government. We have the ability to choose people who think a lot like we do, in order to go into these places of high government and to represent us as constituents. I don't think we do a very good job of doing that, basically due to the free reign that campaigns have in raising funds. Campaign finance needs some drastic reform, and I think our lobbyist positions in government are in need of drastic reform. Unfortunately, so many of these lobbyists and these other special interest groups do influence decisions made by our elected politicians. And, well, that is something that we do need to get a hold of, something we need to reform and take control over. The government is also something that we need in order to protect our freedoms under the Constitution. But it's going to take all of us standing up for what's right, and not necessarily standing up for what's equitable, because it's simply having the freedom to choose given to us by God determines, what we're going to do in life, the things that we're going to develop, while there are some things that make it more difficult to accomplish these things, we're never going to take control of that, and we're never going to reform these things if we don't take an active role in doing that. And, as I mentioned before, a lot of times no role is taken in doing that because somebody thinks, well, why go out and work hard and do this if everything's going to be given to me anyway? And as I had related before, once that starts happening, the individuals who have now become that tax base, they're going to see the kind of things that are being offered free to everybody else. And, why work so hard myself to create all this excess just so that it can be taken from me and handed to those who refuse to do anything for themselves? And it may sound unrealistic to a lot of people, but it is a reality. It's the kind of thing that will happen, and it becomes our responsibility to stand up and prevent that from happening. I know I keep floating here and there on this, but to the point of the title of this video, I believe that New York City is in real danger of having Sharia take over a large part of the city. I believe Mondami's stated goals are simply a policy platform to fool everybody into believing that he can level the playing field for them. Because there are a lot of people who look at the way taxes and services have been administered throughout our country, and they feel like they have been taken advantage of, or that any ability they have to rise up and become better and take hold of the American dream is simply lost. It is not. But especially in a big city like New York City, where everything around you is so much more expensive, climbing up out of that ditch and becoming somebody seems almost impossible, and which makes it understanding why somebody would feel like some of these policies that Mondami has proposed will make their lives easier. And I think it's important that these people take a stronger look at it. Do some of your own research into history. Look at some of these things that seem to appeal to you and find out what the reality is behind it. Discover for yourself what the true American dream is all about. And part of the issue that are causing a lot of people to look more at a socialist idea are the fact that we have had some mass deportations, and it's only right and it's only moral that we look at things from the standpoint of taking care of our neighbors and feeling for those who will be affected by this kind of thing. But at the same time, as I've mentioned before, we are a nation of laws, and laws are necessary in order to maintain peace, in order to maintain civility. Unfortunately, over the past several years, there were no controls at our borders. No realistically fair controls. And we have been overrun by individuals who I understand are looking for a better life in most cases. But at the same time, in doing so, have violated laws. They have violated the laws of our country, the border laws, and simply been spread out throughout our nation, unchecked. And it is a drain, not only on our social services, It's a drain on the job market. And I understand so many people use the argument, well, they're just taking jobs that nobody else will take. That's simply untrue. It it is true in the instance where wages are drastically reduced in some of these jobs in order for higher profits to be made by uh, these institutions. In that sense, yes, when the wages are dropped so drastically that the average person cannot compete in those job markets, they are doing jobs that nobody else wants. I mean, if somebody were to take over an industry and tell everybody, you know, so if they were to take over the industry and tell everybody that I'm going to control what your wages are, and you have no other options, then this is an instance where things will be dropped below what somebody can be able to survive. And this is not something we want. That's why we have in capitalism, in the free market, uh, they're regulated a lot by the people working in those markets. But when we're overrun with individuals who will simply say, yeah, I'll go and do this for a much lower rate, that drives everything down for everyone. And it affects everything else. It affects our social services. It affects all kinds of things throughout the nation that in some ways they were designed to be a kind of safety net for people. But for many people, they've simply become a way of life. And that's something that we need to get a grip on and have some decent regulation in those things. That's why we as individuals need to be more involved. We need to be more involved in our local government, and our state government, and our national government as well. Uh, when we simply decide to elect somebody to represent us and then send them to these governing bodies to do just that, and then we sit back and do nothing, we essentially give them free rein to be subject to special interest groups, to these lobbyists, the people who want to sway them in their direction. And that's what happens because we think that our job is complete once we exit that polling booth. As citizens, it is not only our right, but it is our duty, it is our obligation to be more involved. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to run for office yourself. In many cases, yeah, absolutely, run for office. If you have the ability to speak well, if you have the ability to be persuasive and to see things in a clear light, then by all means run for office. Make a difference using your mind, using your desire to live in a better country, to live and apply yourself to the American dream. But it doesn't necessarily have to be running for office. It can be simply reaching out within your community and helping others, making videos, expressing your opinion. And if you're not completely sure of the policies, then ask the questions. We are not simply pawns on the chessboard. We have the opportunity to get involved and be part of the governing body, much beyond just electing somebody to office. Uh, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take us all as individuals to step forward and say, look, uh, this is what I put you in office for. These are the kind of things that you sold me a bill of goods through your platform when you ran for office. This is what you said you were going to do. And I'm going to hold your feet to that, the fire on that, because you know, we're not going to allow you to sell us something and then turn your back on it. We as constituents at all levels need to be involved in opening our mouths and making it known that we are going to hold our elected officials accountable. Unfortunately, it can't be just a few who do that. We as a citizenship as a whole need to be involved. And as far as New York City, of course, yes. The majority of those voting voted Mondami into office. And I honestly believe that they have done that to their own peril. Uh, and this is just a small sampling of the things that they're going to face because of the decision that they have made. A lot of the things, as I said before, that he has claimed he wants to do are beyond his control. And fortunately, there are people at the state level in New York who can prevent some of these things from happening. And I pray that they govern in good consciences. Because I don't believe there's any city in our nation that I would want to disparage and say that they don't believe to be, or they don't deserve to be here. We should just do away with them altogether. I mean, we hear this kind of sometimes jovial rhetoric that people use because they don't know how else to react to some of these things. For years, people have talked about the situation in California, and they've always, jokingly wished that along that fault line that California would simply drop off into the ocean and be done away with. And sure, there are many probably who really believe that that would be a good thing. But I think as a whole, when we all work together, then we benefit our nation as a whole. So it becomes our obligation. It becomes our duty to serve our neighbors and serve our communities through being a part of the governance of our society. If you like anything you've heard, if you have any comments or anything, please make them. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Make your comments and leave your questions, and that will help me to better assess what kind of content to make in the future. Again, this is a platform for me for expressing opinions, and I'm sure that others will disagree, and you have every right to do so. But once again, if you like what you've heard, if you'd like to hear more, hit that like button and subscribe and share this with other people, and hopefully we can make a difference in helping our communities become more involved in serving our communities. Thank you. Word out.